The death toll has risen. 11 dead, nearly 70 wounded in weekend's bloodiest gun violence initiated by gangs of Chicago. Chicago's gangland of killers and gang animals running amok. This problem is out of control, and people are desperate for help. This is a war zone in an American country, an American city that weekend.
So what do you guys want?
Pistachio, chocolate chip.
Rock and roll. I see what's going on here. Everybody's got different things.
So while it is in intermission, basically the article is reading about the incident that happened. So at first it seemed like there were only 40, but that number has grown. And unfortunately, that number may grow even more.
40 people were shot, 4 killed in just one 7-hour period.
Yeah, at least one paramedic describes it as a war zone. For some, it was a painful reminder of the historic levels of gun violence from years past. Here's Brad Milkey.
Hey guys, yeah, even for a city that has seen so much gun violence, what we saw this weekend in Chicago was an outbreak. About 60 people were shot over the weekend, more than 40 shot on Sunday morning alone. At least 9 people are dead. Now, I talked to ABC's Ryan Burrow, who is based in Chicago, and he says when you scan the list of shootings, you can actually see the gangs going back and forth.
You may see 4 people shot in Englewood, and it's always the same storyline. A bunch of people standing on a street corner, and someone pulls up in a car and opens fire. Now, police rarely solve these murders or shootings for that matter. And then, as you continue to look down the media rundown, you'll see a very similar shooting happening just a few blocks away and the same number of people involved.
And Ryan says you can see it. The vast majority of shootings taking place in just a few neighborhoods. And that, he says, is what activists are worried about. They say they're out of sight and out of mind. And there were big anti-violence demonstrations just last week. And this weekend, somehow, things got even worse. You can hear more about the epidemic of violence in Chicago on Start Here later this morning. Check it out on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. Candace, Maggie.
All right, our thanks to Brad.
So that is basically a rundown of what has happened. And so Chicago Associated Press, at least 11. It says 11 people were shot to death and about 70 wounded in a weekend burst of violence in Chicago that instantly became a political issue when President Donald Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani blamed the carnage on longtime Democratic rule in the city. Police on Monday attributed the dozens of the shootings to gangs. And that's basically where it's coming from. It's from gangs. The illegal flow of guns as well, and the sweltering August heat that drew more people outside because the weather has changed dramatically where a lot of people are hot. And so it brings out a lot of people on porches and they want to go out and they want to sit out under the shade and get out from under an insulated house or apartment. And so the victims range from ages 11 to 63 years of age, according to the police. So one teenage girl died after being shot in the face. Teenage boy was fatally shot riding his bike Sunday afternoon. And other shootings took place at a block party and a funeral. So even the Chicagoan people, all too accustomed to the violence in parts of the city, the weekend stood out. This one particular weekend stood out. By way of comparison, at least 7 people were killed and 32 were wounded during the long Memorial weekend, the Chicago Tribune reported. So our souls are burdened. Mayor Rahm Emanuel, he stated this. So it is unacceptable to happen in any neighborhood of Chicago, and we are a better city. So echoing the comments that Trump himself has made repeatedly about Chicago, and Giuliani blamed Emanuel, President Barack Obama, White House Chief of Staff, and the decades of the one-party Democratic rule is a series of tweets on Sunday and Monday. The former New York mayor also tweeted his support for the Chicago mayoral candidate and the former police superintendent Gary McCarthy, referring to him as the Jerry and calling him a policing genius. So McCarthy plans to run the next February against Emanuel, who fired McCarthy in 2015 after the release of the dash cam video showing white police officers killing a black teenager by shooting him 16 times. So misspelling Emanuel's last name, Giuliani tweeted, "He can do a lot better than Mayor Emanuel, who is fiddling while Chicago burns." Giuliani also falsely claimed that Chicago had 63 murders this weekend. The mayor had no immediate comment on Giuliani's attacks. So most of the shootings have happened in poor neighborhoods on the west and south sides of Chicago where gangs are entrenched. Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson, standing next to the mayor, stated this. And so Johnson noted that the homicides in the city are down by 20% from the last year. But he said that the gang members and the others arrested on the gun charges aren't dealt with harshly enough. So it is the same people who are pulling the triggers, he said. This is a small subset of individuals who think they can play by their own rules because they continue to get a slap on the wrist when we arrest them. So Johnson said that at morning news conference, there had been no arrest in any of the weekend shootings. So those people who were involved in those shootings are still running around. And so it very well could happen again, especially if it's gang related and it has involvements with money, drugs, illegal guns, turf wars. So days before the attacks, 200 protesters marched through the well-to-do North Side neighborhood and briefly closed Lakeshore Drive, calling for more resources to stem the violence in the poorer areas. So the people that live there that are not a part of the gangs, that are not a part of the violence, are not the problem. And it isn't an African-American problem alone. It's the gangs, the illegal drugs, the illegal guns, and the heavy policing that is there that is not actually dealing with the real situations they need to be dealing with. And then when regular people who aren't involved in the gangs call the police, they're afraid to even call the police because they're the ones that are dealt with and roughed up when they should be roughing up the gangs. They're probably afraid, or maybe they're in on it. It's a possibility. Maybe they're getting paid because drug money and extortion, bribes, a lot of that can all go hand in hand. So it goes on to say that T.O. Hardeman, one of the last week's rallies, said that members of the Black community need to take the initiative by mediating truces between gangs. So they want the people of the neighborhoods to initiate getting the gangs to call a truce. That's going to be difficult. It might happen and it may not, because there's bigger evils at play here. We got the illegal guns, the drugs, and all the drug trafficking that is going on in the cities. And it's not just going on in Chicago, it's going on in other places too. And then you have the young people who complain about being jobless or not being able to make as much money as they would desire because it's quick money and drug money. And then the popularity of the glorification of the violence in Chicago. So the violence has peaked early Sunday, including one shooting on the South people. So security was increased over the weekend at the outdoor Lollapalooza music festival downtown Chicago, which drew tens of thousands of young people, of course. It is a nice summer, nice atmosphere. Young people are out. And you know, young people, sometimes they drink and they're doing drugs. Some of them will do that. Some of them are in gangs. It's just 650 homicides, and it down from 771 the year before. Though the drop was significant, last year's total exceeded the combined number of killings in New York and Los Angeles as well. So it happens in other places and other cities. The two U.S. cities bigger than Chicago. So in a statement, McCarthy called himself the proud Democrat and distanced himself from Giuliani's views, the misguided, divisive tone, and policies of Donald Trump. So McCarthy said the blame for the bloodshed lies squarely with Rahm Emanuel's weak leadership and failed policy, not with Chicago Democrats as a whole. So there are over 10,005